Mrs. Snee, you are live.
All
Ready to
right.
go.
Thank you. Good evening. It is Monday, May 11th, about 5:05 in the evening, and this is a meeting of the Community and Economic Development Committee. We have myself, Mrs. Snee, Mr. Roselle, and Mr. Twist as members of this committee. We're meeting tonight to discuss providing a recommendation to council regarding entering into the 2020 CHIP program agreement with Miami County, Piqua, and Tip City. And I understand we are considering this as emergency legislation. Mr. Titterington, do you have information?
Yes, ma'am, you have the report. CHIP stands for Community Housing Impact and Preservation Program. It is a federally funded program administered through the state. It is part of the CDBG blanket program. It provides funding for low and moderate income housing renovations. And we have been part of this agreement since 2017 as far as a formal agreement goes. We recommend that we continue this arrangement by doing this as a consolidated partnership. We do receive more points, which maximizes the amount of money that we receive. We are targeted to receive $260,000 for direct funding, plus an additional $23,000 for Nikki Reese, who is our management analyst that we recently hired to administer, and be awarded grants. And this is one of those opportunities where we can offset some of her costs by administering our part of the program. We are asking for emergency legislation because Miami County has to gather all of these agreements or resolutions, and then we will have to. Then there will have to be a consolidated application signed and filed through the appropriate channels.
And I just had one question. Did I read correctly in here that we identify the projects after the application is approved, or we have those projects ready?
We formally identify those projects because we have to reach out to those folks. We are constantly generating a list of eligible projects, but there's a lot of work to do after the approvals that you and the state make. And so it's a little bit of both, but mostly it happens after the agreement is signed.
Okay. Are there any questions from any of the members of the committee?
Just
Mr. Twist.
just clarification, Patrick. On the 2019 funds, did we utilize all those? And if the funds aren't utilized, it just stays in that account, correct?
Nikki, you're on the call, so I'm not sure that we used all of them. I do not believe that they carry forward. Each agreement is a new fiscal year.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So in 2019, Miami County applied for a CHIP grant and was not funded last year. So we did not receive any funding last year.
That's right.
Okay, but the funding, it's for this year. We find projects is to be utilized in the year it's given.
Correct. So we apply this year, and then next year we will be able to implement the projects.
Okay.
Mr. Roselle, any questions?
No, ma'am.
All right. Any other members of council have questions? Mr. Phillips?
Thank you. Mr. Titterington, the funds will be administered by the county, and out of that 800,000, we will get 200,000 plus dollars. Is that what my understanding is?
We will get 260,000 plus 23,000. And so Nikki will administer our part of the program, the projects that are awarded within the city of Troy.
And the accountability is to the federal government and not to the county?
I believe the accountability is through the state acting on behalf of the federal dollars.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? If not, then do I have agreements from the other committee members to move forward with emergency?
Move forward.
Yeah, move forward with emergency.
All right, then the committee's unanimous. I don't think there are any other items to come before this committee, so we are adjourned.
Very good, thank you. So we can roll right into community partnerships. Mr. Roselle.
Ready? It's 5:10, and this is the Community Partnership Committee with members John Schweizer, Zach Allen, and myself, Bill Roselle, as chairman. And we are to provide a recommendation to City Council to accept additional land from the Lincoln Community Center at 124 Ash Street. And this is also to be considered a emergency legislation request. It's just, you want to explain, we're just consolidating into one lot, aren't we?
So last year, we were able to assemble the various parcels and as well as the principal building at Lincoln Community Center into one lot, one parcel, if you will. That property is known as 110 Ash Street. When the architect drew, and so you're all aware that they are looking at an expansion project to the rear of the current building. And as they were drawing up their needs to match their fundraising and vice versa, what they discovered was that part of the building would actually extend over into 124. 124 is also owned by Lincoln Community Center. What we could not do is provide approvals through zoning and through the building department to build on two separate lots that were owned by two separate entities. And so as part of streamlining their construction project, what will happen with your approval is Lincoln Community Center will deed 124 to the city. It will be combined with 110. There is an alley vacation that needs to occur. That will be a next step. And then the CIC and the city, the contracts with Lincoln Community Center would be amended to reflect a couple of things, update in maintenance, quid pro quo between the park department and Lincoln Community Center to everyone's benefit, and then to include this new replatted single lot. So the first step is for the council to accept the additional land of 124 so that we can then get it combined and do the alley vacation, et cetera.
Members have any questions?
If you're outside the committee, I have a question.
I guess since Zach or John didn't respond.
Zach gave the thumbs up. John.
There's John. John's on now.
Yeah, wait a minute. Does this all become 110 Ash Street at this point?
It will eventually once it's all combined, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Bobby?
Zach, you were muted. Did you have something?
No, I'm good.
Okay. I think, Mr. Titterington, I think Mr. Schweizer answered my question in that 124 Ash Street in its entirety is being deeded to or titled to the city of Troy. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. That's all I had. Thank you.
Any other people? Recommendation?
I'm good with it.
Proceed with emergency legislation, please.
I'm good with
Okay.
emergency.
It's unanimous to go forward with the emergency legislation for making that one lot and deeded to the city.
Okay.
Anything else, Patrick?
No, sir.
Then this committee is adjourned. Thank you.
Moving to the Finance Committee, Mr. Schweizer.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. It is 5:15 on the 11th of May, and this is a meeting of the Finance Committee. With me is Mr. Phillips and Mr. Siebert, and we are here to discuss changes to Section 909 of the Codified Ordinances regarding utility bills. Mr. Titterington, do you have this?
Yes, sir, I do. Let me see. That is. Todd, are you unmuted?
Yeah.
You are unmuted, okay. So section 909.05 regulates utility billing, among other things, and our current code provides that we can negotiate with delinquent utility bill payers up to 90 days as a payment plan, recognizing that we are in the second month of the edict from the Ohio EPA that we not shut off delinquent bills. We are trying to look ahead. There is no target date yet for when enforcement can reoccur. But as we open up the building, we are encouraging those that are on the delinquent list to come in, talk to us, start working out payment plans so they don't get too far behind. I don't have the exact numbers. I'd hope to have them this evening, but at last count, we had over 700 accounts with delinquencies totaling between $120,000 and $140,000. As this emergency declaration is extended, which it can be up until December 1st, of course, that number we expect will only grow larger and larger. So we continue to encourage folks. We have a couple of mechanisms that we would like you to approve some flexibility in for this time period. One of which is allowing for bills that are up to July 1st, that any delinquencies be available or allowed as we sit down with them to have payment plans of up to 180 days. That would be an administrative function, much like it is now, but it would take into account history, track record, as well as the amount of delinquency. And then we'll look at ability to pay and impact from the current situation. The other is the possibility of, in the future, offering possibly some kind of a grant program. Now, that is not a grant program that would be funded by the city, the water or sewer funds, but there has been some exploration across the state, actually across the country, that part of the stimulus money may be available to be able to use in at least the extreme cases for offsetting some of these obligations as well as others. It's very early. It's very difficult to say whether or not that will be eligible because there are still regulations being formulated at the federal level. But in the event that happens, it's probably going to happen sooner than later. And so the way that the language that we would like you to consider to put into the 909.05 is to allow us to establish some kind of a grant program, the details of which we just don't know at this point, but it would depend on either payment by or reimbursement by, guaranteed payment or reimbursement by the state of Ohio and or federal government. U.S. government. So again, it's nebulous, I know, but it provides us that flexibility because as we start getting people in, we know that things are going to change. They're going to change very rapidly. And our overall intent here is to provide as many tools as quickly as possible so that we can get people back on track related to their water, sewer, storm, and refuse obligations. And we are asking for emergency legislation again because we are wanting to sit down with folks as soon as possible. We will be sending a letter out to all those with delinquencies, letting them know that we want to sit down and talk to them, that the building is open, and that they can schedule appointments to come in and talk to us as soon as possible.
Do we know how many were delinquent prior to March 15th when this was all put into place?
Well, I can tell you in a typical month, we have 2 cycles of billing. And in a typical month, it's probably average about 150 customers.
So we had about 550 because of the COVID situation.
And counting plus, and it's over 700. I just don't have an exact number, but yes, that has gone up exponentially.
Would where how do I put this? The people that have been unable to pay, is that based on what the governor has said, and would where we're not, how do I put this? Where we're not requiring people due to hardship to pay, does that end when the governor ends the state of emergency, or are we looking at July 15th or July 1st?
According to the law that was passed at the state level, that is in effect until the emergency is lifted by the governor, or December 1st, whichever is soonest. There's been some question as to whether that's a legal order. Nobody has chosen to challenge it. As you might recall, prior to this order being handed down to us, we had already decided that we were not going to shut folks off, much like everybody else in the region. It is what it is, I suppose. We are, though, wanting to set a deadline so that the 180-day payment plan option is not a permanent thing. So it will, the code will revert, our code will revert back to the 90-day window, which we've always had in place. However, for this period during the impactful time, we're recommending that you extend the allowance to up to 6 months or 180 days.
I agree with us at some point in the future, trying to recoup that $140,000 or $120,000. Is there anything in here that's allowing for some flexibility for people who, just because the governor lifts the state of emergency and people are allowed to go back to work, doesn't mean that everybody's going to go back to work? For example, restaurant workers, people that work downtown, some people in the retail aren't going to be able to go back because people aren't going to go flocking back to restaurants and go flocking back to retail establishments or bars anytime real soon. It's just not going to be, the floodgates are going to open. Is there any kind of leniency in there for those people?
Not sure what you mean by leniency, but first of all, these are not general funds. These are enterprise funds, and so they are paid by the customers 100%. And so when someone doesn't pay their bill, then everybody else has to pick up the slack, which we've been doing now for a couple of months as far as cash flow. This is why part of the report that you have explores the possibility of some kind of a grant program. It's also a reason, Mr. Swayzer, why one of the reasons why we're recommending going from 90 days to 180 days so that we can stretch that out, as we know that people are going to roll back in to the workforce gradually and at different times.
Okay. Mr. Phillips?
Yes, thank you. With our arrearage folks, the 700 and the 150 that have been habitual, would that be an accurate word with that 150 number?
No, I wouldn't say habitual. That implies that they're repeat.
Right.
And those 150 are not repeats. I would say that in talking to Ronnie, they probably 25% of them, give or take, at any normal month might be a repeat on the list.
Got it. So are any of these business accounts?
Some of them are business accounts. Not, I had hoped to have that number. It is a small subset, but there are some. Go ahead, Ronnie.
Between the two lists, we have 24 business accounts currently.
Oh, that's not bad. Okay. Thank you. Did you get that, Mr. Phillips?
Yeah, I did. I'm just trying to wrap my head around that. I think I'm not going to speak for Mr. Schweizer, but my opinion at this moment is being able to work with our customers to the best of our ability is the right thing to do. And the sooner we get this done, I think that is going to be to everybody's benefit. So that's where I'm at with it.
Is that it, Bobby?
Thank you.
Mr. Sievert?
Patrick or Ronnie, either one, I guess. Does this have any impact on the third-party indemnification clauses that exist?
Explain that a little bit more, please.
I think you still require landlords to sign indemnification agreements for the non-payment of the water bills. Is that correct?
It is.
Okay, so out of the 700, how many of those are, I guess, are landlords still being sent notices that that their tenants are delinquent? And you're talking about a grant system. I guess, are you going to look at that on a per case by case basis? Or are we going to say, hey, there's a third party indemnity, I guess is the legal term, that would be responsible for this bill, so they're not going to be eligible for the grant, versus somebody who is, I guess, owner occupied deal? What would be the criteria for the grant?
Well, so that's an excellent question, and it's something that, as the state and the federal government clarify that for us, then we will know. However, there are very narrow parameters around which a grant can be given under the COVID stimulus 1, 2, 3, 4, whichever number we're on now. And part of that does not relate to indemnification, but rather direct impact of the pandemic. And so we will have to get, whether it's owner occupied, renter, indemnified or not, we will be requiring paperwork that shows that there was a direct impact, and that direct impact could lead to homelessness, eviction, etc. So there's some details that have to be worked out. The first of which is whether or not it's actually going to be allowable to even have this grant program.
Are third-party people being notified that they're not, I mean, you're still sending out monthly bills, right?
Correct.
Okay, so in a situation of a landlord tenant, a landlord will be aware that their tenant has elected to defer or hasn't paid. I guess the inverse to this is you're going to come into July and you're going to have a bunch of people that haven't paid for 180 days, and you're going to be looking at landlords to come up with hundreds, potentially, of dollars at the end of that time frame. And I just want to make sure that appropriate notice is being sent to all of those individuals that their tenants aren't paying their water bills.
And we will make sure that happens.
Okay. I'm all for. I mean, I agree with John's sentiment and Bobby's sentiment. I'm not being, I'm appreciative of the situation. I just think that we have to make sure that we communicate that as well to everybody so that there's not any surprises.
If I may.
Go ahead, Bobby.
To Todd's point, clarify in my mind, would the third party landlord, business owner, or whoever that is the indemnifying the principal occupant, they are going to be involved in the conversation and be involved in all of the processes, that they're 100% aware. That's what I'm hearing?
You are.
Okay, that's it.
Okay. And that was my concern. I agree.
And we don't know how many of the people that are delinquent in their water bill are in a rental situation, do we?
On the two lists, one has 124 landlords, the other list has 167 landlords. Then I was working on the numbers as we started the meeting, so the 700 between the two lists has gone down to 547 from some payments being made. So the 547 number is now our current owed number, and the landlord portion of that, 124 on one and 167 on the other.
Roughly 300.
Thank you.
Why are there two lists? What are the two lists?
Because we have 2 cycles
Oh,
per
gotcha.
month.
Okay,
We divide the city in half.
gotcha.
Okay. Anyone else on council have any questions or comments? Anyone? Mr. Phillips, your pleasure
To proceed as staff is recommending.
for emergency?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Sievert?
I concur.
Okay.
I concur.
I do also, Mrs. Knight. Anything else come before finance?
No, sir.
Okay, we are adjourned.
Okay, Mr. Phillips, I'm sorry, Mr. Schilling, Mr. Phillips, and Mr. Twizzier.
Yeah. You can say something.
Hello. I had a question about
Who
Cedar
is this?
Street.
Who is this?
This is Derek McCoy, 42 South Cedar.
Mr. McCoy, there are no comments. If you'd like to email your questions, because we're on Zoom, we cannot handle it the same way we would in a public meeting. So if you'd like to email, be glad to follow up.
Okay. What is there going to be any more like public meetings like soon to where? Because like I'm using my neighbors now. I don't have internet at my house.
Okay. You are talking about the committee that met earlier at 5 o'clock, and I imagine the Community Partnerships Committee with Lincoln Community Center. That issue's already been discussed. There will be a council meeting, a Zoom council meeting next Monday at 7 o'clock. If you have any questions or comments, please email those to me or to Mrs. Knight, or you can drop them off in the Dropbox at City Hall prior to next Monday, and we'll make sure that the council gets those. before they take any action.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Sure.
Hey, Mr. Terwilliger, how you doing?
Doing well.
He's my health teacher there.
All right, I'm going to mute you, Derek. We got to go
Okay.
to another committee. So, all right. So who am I missing? Phillips, Terwilliger, Phillips, and Jeff. You're all unmuted. Everybody else is muted. All right, Mr. Schilling,
Okay,
it's all yours.
ready to go. Okay, this is Monday, May 11, 2020, and this is the meeting of the Recreation and Parks Committee. It is now 5:35 p.m. In attendance are myself, Mr. Schilling, and also Mr. Phillips and Mr. Terwilliger. Okay, the first thing we're going to talk about tonight is we are asked to provide a recommendation to council regarding authorizing the Board of Park Commissioners to execute an easement within Waco Park associated with an improvement project at Conagra Foods as recommended by the Board of Park Commissioners. They are asking consideration of emergency legislation is requested. Mr. Titterington, can you provide any additional information on this?
Sure, just that the park board did recommend this. They're in agreement with granting this easement. It is an electric easement that is related to the most recent expansion of at Conagra, very important project, and we are recommending this as well. Since there's lots of paperwork and there's lots of filing that has to be done. The representative from DP&L has requested that you consider this as emergency legislation so that it can get filed as quickly as possible.
Okay, any questions or comments from the committee? Mr. Terwilliger and Mr. Phillips?
None here.
No.
Okay. I have no comments or questions. Is anything in any of the committee or the council have any questions on this? Okay, they don't hear anything. Okay, so I think we should go ahead and move forward on this. Does anybody have any objections?
I would agree, move forward.
Yeah, please move forward as staff is recommending.
And emergency legislation on that, right?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, great. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is review the recommendation regarding declaring as surplus a portion of Archer Park. This has been through several readings, and we have heard back from the park commissioners. So now we have a opportunity to discuss this further. I'm going to reserve any comments until a little bit later. I understand the committee members want to reserve their comments as well, if they want to make any. John, Bobby?
Potentially when we get done here with going over the.
Okay, I understand Mrs. Mayor Odo would like to make a comment or two.
Hey, everybody. I do have a request to make. I am requesting that any and all surplus park property sales be suspended until an investigation regarding the encroachment and building of a permanent structure on city property at Archer Park is completed. This should never have been sent to this council committee for approval without investigation by the park board. As there are questions regarding the involvement of a park employee, this adds an additional layer of difficulty to the issue. Multiple questions were asked of the park board at the last committee meeting on March 9th, giving them another opportunity to conduct an investigation. As that did not happen, I'm asking for this suspension until an investigation is done. Also, as part of this request, I'm asking for a detailed report of park properties, their boundaries, and any encroachments that might be in place. I'm also asking that policies and procedures regarding the declaration and sale of surplus parcels be reviewed and/or further developed.
Okay, thank you. Are you requesting this as a, not as an ordinance, but as a
recommendation?
Recommendation from us.
From us?
Recommendation.
Okay.
My request.
Okay. Okay, are there any other council people that would like to make any comments at this time or questions? John Schweizer?
There's something on my,
You just-
Okay, John's out. Okay, Bill Rosell, go ahead.
Mute.
You're good.
Who are you proposing to do the investigation?
The park board could have done it. At this point, we may have to get our human resources department involved to help out.
Bill, it's been longstanding practice that the city's human resources assists all departments, recreation,
That's fine.
parks, as well as ours. And
That's
so,
fine.
yeah, I understand. I just to clarify for those folks that might not know. So certainly we have made that offer already, and that offer is still out there.
Okay. Hello.
Okay, any other?
yes, I
John
do.
Schweizer?
Yeah.
Ellen,
Jeff.
if I may, in addition to the park inventory
Leslie.
that
Yeah.
the mayor has requested, can we also do that with alleys in the city?
As far as I know.
There's a lot of encroachment on alleys as
Yeah,
well.
it can be.
Yeah, that would be separate from this, but we can certainly do that. We have routinely been going through the alleys slowly but surely to determine whether or not they're needed, whether they can be vacated. But we can certainly take a look at that. Now, keep in mind that we will not have the same level of summer resources as we've had in the past, because we are trying to conserve a little bit. So certainly the first priority, given the situation and the fact that not only is there are several requests related to Archer Park, there's also a request to dispose of Waco Park. And so we'd like to focus our staffing or our analysis first on the park properties, and then as we can, we will get into the alleys.
Okay. I remember Mr. Phillips had a situation a while back that he got involved in and had to help resolve. And I know that there's several alleys within the third ward that have been encroached upon.
Sure.
So.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, Mr. Shipping, I understand at this time we can, we first have to consider the Archer Park.
Excuse me, Jeff, for a second.
Yes.
If I could, now what we've just talked about, we do not need to act on. The mayor has made this recommendation.
We could, no, I think what we need to do there, John, is to, we can
pass it on to council.
We can pass it on to council with an approval or a disapproval. But my question is, do we look at the Archer Park first and then Mayor Oda's request? What's the proper procedure on that?
Well, I think your first item is what you would like to do with Archer Park. Now, you can make the blanket recommendation, the policy recommendation to the council, whether or not you're asking for a resolution or just some guidance that's really up to the committee. And then you dispose of the other items. But in the case of Archer, since it is in its sixth reading,
right.
And it did go back to the committee to then go to the park board, and is now before the committee again. I believe you would need to make a recommendation in favor or against so that you can dispose of the seventh reading next Monday night.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
If I may.
So I have some comments on this. And First, we as council or committee are not bound by precedent or decisions made by any prior council or committee. So what was decided or not decided in selling surplus parklands by prior city councils or committees in prior years should have no bearing on the decisions of this committee or council. The argument that because a certain parcel of parkland was offered as surplus and sold in a prior year, and therefore this parcel should be offered as surplus, carries no weight. Almost 40 years ago, Forrest Archer gave this land that is now called Archer Park to the citizens of Troy. He could have developed this land as he did many other parcels, but he chose to donate the land. In return, he asked that we be good stewards of the land, and we responded by constructing and maintaining Archer Park. Today, Archer Park sits in the middle of one of the fastest growing residential areas in Troy. As this area continues to grow, the need for recreational parklands will only continue to grow as well. Who is to say what the recreational or parkland needs of this area will be in 20 or 25 years from now? We may need every square inch of Archer Park. Today, we are being asked to offer for sale as surplus City of Troy parklands on which a basketball court was constructed without the city's permission by the family that is now requesting that the parklands be declared surplus. There can be no question that the family knew that they were constructing a basketball court on city parkland property. This is not a case of where the construction might have straddled the property line. This court is squarely and totally on city parkland property. Their argument that they were taking care of the land in question by mowing or otherwise maintaining the land, and their request to possibly purchase the land are somehow tied together, again, bears no weight. The city of Troy maintained the land as housing was being constructed by first hedge hogging the growth, and then as the surrounding properties developed, close mowing the field. No one from the city asked them to maintain or improve any property in question. Most people would be outraged if a permanent structure was built on their property by someone else, who then requested that the property and structure be put up for sale, giving them the chance to purchase it. On the merits, this is nothing more than one party encroaching on the land of another. The answer is simple. Yet some feel that the city of Troy should react differently and grant this over-the-top request because the city has so much parkland and this is such a small parcel, and what difference does it make? It makes a big difference. The city should not reward bad behavior. Good stewardship requires that this request be denied. The park department has assured us that there's no problem with mowing and maintaining the area in question. The basketball court should be examined for any maintenance issues and potential liability issues, and improvements or corrections be made as needed. In this regards, I don't think we should go forward with this at this particular time. Hey, Mr. Phillips, Mr. Twilliger?
If I may.
Go ahead.
I have, in the grand scheme of things, I think it is appropriate probably to go ahead with this, but however, how this has come about is very concerning to me. Analogy was presented to me today by a person that indicated, well, if the city had a need for a piece of equipment that was a $500,000 item, however, a department head could get the item for $300,000, but would receive a stipend back off of that purchase agreement. Would the city go ahead and make that purchase to save that money? And my comment back to them is absolutely not, because number one, it is illegal for any department head, employee, or anybody else to receive a gratuity or a kickback or do anything of an illegal fashion or make money off of some type of governmental agency contract. And number two, if any member of council, if we did in fact go ahead and vote to do that sort of activity, we would be also guilty as an accessory after the fact in engaging in that activity. And that's the type of activity that we're acquiescing to here by following the park board's recommendation. So
Uh-oh.
Yeah. That is
We lost Phillips.
this is a grand exit right there.
Well, do you want me to fill in the vacant,
Why don't
the
why don't
vacant
you go ahead
air?
and fill in and we'll get back to Mr. Phillips.
Okay. The individuals who live adjacent to Archer Park, I think it is a correct statement that there is space and surplus lands there. I do not have a problem with people in proper fashion having the opportunity to purchase surplus land that helps the city in a maintenance aspect and also provides something for some of the people that live there. But the way this thing has happened, I think really needs to have a closer look at the procedures and the guidelines. If, for example, any of us on city council had told someone that there's a spot on Archer Park, you go build something there. If we had done that, I'm not so certain there would be a lot of popular fans for that individual. The proper fashion has been mentioned in certain ways, that each case or purchase of surplus land is done on a case-by-case basis. Okay, I can kind of get individual, but each individual choice has to have a baseline. It needs to have those core questions off of which adjustments or alteration is made. I don't think right at this point in time, when we do those individual choices, we've got that established baseline, which I think we need, because there will be other similar situations. So I would have trouble moving forward with it until such time that there is established guidelines, base bones off of which decisions are made.
Mr. Phillips, I see you're back online.
yeah, I apologize. The battery died on my laptop and the power source ferry took a little bit of time to get power in there. So I had to re-log in. Sorry about that.
Okay.
My basic thought, did everybody understand that?
I think you got through most of it, yes.
Got it. Okay. Then,
yeah.
But my recommendation follows the mayor at this point, in that a policy and procedure is needed and a complete inventory of our parks to determine any other incursions or any of the discrepancies that we have, because we don't have any list of those sort of things. And it would be critical in order to move forward. And it also goes back to a previous property that was not represented well by the park board that was a similar nature. And had we known all the facts at that time, perhaps we would have recommended to rectify all of this stuff and we wouldn't have this situation at this time. So with full transparency and moving forward, I think that is the best thing in order to do for the governmental agency and use of the taxpayers' land and money going forward with this.
Okay. So we are, my understanding is we are 3-0 not to proceed with this, recommend not to proceed with this recommendation. Is that correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, our next item of business then is we want to look at Mayor Oda's request for a resolution as she had outlined it, doing a survey and setting some standards on how we handle surplus property. We have any questions or any additional questions for Mayor Oda or comments on that particular item?
I think that the recommendation coming on this point would be the same, to table this one or to hold it until we have completed the inventory and policies and procedures, or that the park board has done those items.
I missed what he said. I didn't hear
Could
that.
you repeat that, Bobby, for us, please, Mr. Phillips?
I think that the action on Waco Park, can you hear me?
Okay, we're not talking
Yeah,
about
you've
Waco
got,
Park.
yes, we can
I'm
hear
sorry.
you, Bobby, but you've got 2 devices up. Now you have 1.
Not any longer.
There, that's better.
There you
Okay,
go.
we're not talking about Waco Park right now. We're talking about Mayor Oda's request resolution to put a moratorium on all sales of park properties, which may include the Waco Park.
Got it.
Until we get some standards and also get a survey of the park lands.
Right. Okay.
So are we in favor of doing, Mr. Kerber is waving at me. Yes, sir. We need to unmute.
You're muted. You're unmuted now.
All right. Just from a procedural standpoint, it's my understanding that the committee does not want to proceed further with any request to sell surplus real estate until such time that some policies put in place on how they're going to consider future requests. Instead of having a formal moratorium, I think it would be sufficient to send your report to the park board, just indicating that the committee and council is not inclined to entertain any requests to sell the property until such time as those policies are in place. I don't believe that a formal moratorium is necessary.
Okay, can we draft a letter to that accord, and then we would sign it at our next committee meeting? Would that how we would do that?
I think it could be reflected in the minutes that, and you could ask that the Mrs. Knight forward it to the park board.
Would be based on the report.
Does that sound reasonable?
Oh yeah, I think that's the proper procedure.
Okay.
Mr. Lutz has a question, I believe.
Go ahead, Mr. Lutz. You're
unmuted.
My question is I guess there's 2. First of all, the park board does not have any policies as stated on these issues. Is that correct?
Correct. My thing is their policy is that it's a case-by-case basis only.
So if the policies are adopted by the park board, do those policies have to be approved by the park board and council, or would council just be sufficient and just have those policies approved by the park board?
Well, I think just to weigh in here, Mr. Lutz, the appropriate procedure would be for a recommendation to come from the park board and then be approved by the council, only because in every case, the park board recommends when it believes a parcel or a piece of property is surplus, and the council has the final action on that. So if there's not concurrence on what those policies are, conflicts may continue to arise every time a request or a recommendation is forwarded.
So the policies themselves would end up, in effect, being approved by council.
Mr. Kerber is shaking his head no.
I guess my thought would be is that you're requesting that some sort of policy be put in place. Obviously, the park board is a public meeting. Presumably that some policies will be put in place. And what I would anticipate is if there's a dissatisfaction with either the policy or the next request to sell surplus property, that's when the committee as well as council would have an opportunity to weigh in and let their feelings be known to the park board.
Okay.
Okay, while we're on the subject then, if the park board decides that they are not going to formulate any policies or standards concerning sale of park property, then can city council weigh in and tell them this is what, you know, we can set the standards, Mr. Kerber?
Well, I would rather not get into too many hypotheticals and do what ifs. If it gets to that point in time, we'll evaluate it.
Okay, fair enough.
Just as a point of clarification, this particular park is titled to the city and not the park board. Is that correct?
Correct.
Correct. Okay. So we're in essence controlling our property, not the park boards, but the policy and the past practice has been for the park board to handle all of these and do an adequate job in doing the investigation behind the scenes and with the recommendation, with the park's mission in mind off of that. So that's why I believe that they have been involved in this particular process from the start. Would that be correct, Mr. Titterington?
That sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, so my understanding is the wish of this committee that we're going to draft a letter, or the notes will be sent to the park board. Saying essentially there's going to be a moratorium on approval of any more sale of parklands until such time as we have an opportunity to do the survey and hopefully have them set some standards on how sale of parkland is handled. Is that be a fair summary?
I think to Mr. Grant or to Mr. Kerber's point that the word moratorium should not come into that, but I think it's taking these items under consideration is going to be put on hold would be a more
put on hold. Okay, we can use that put on hold
wording.
Mr. Chair, we can draft up a transmittal letter with the minutes of the report of this committee and make sure that's clarified in the minutes.
Okay, that sounds great. Are we all in favor of that then?
Agreed.
Yes.
Agreed. Okay. Okay, the last thing we have to do on our list here is provide a recommendation to council regarding declaring surplus Waco Park as recommended by the Board of Park Commissioners. And I think that based on our prior conversations, I think this also would probably be put on hold until such time as we get the surveys and all the other things done. Is that, can we do that?
That would be my recommendation also.
Okay. Mr. Colliger?
Agreed.
Okay, I think we're in agreement on that. Is there anything else that should be coming before the committee?
No.
Sure.
Okay, I think we are adjourned.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.